Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah's Stories. Have you ever made one impulsive decision that changed your life forever? Today's tale begins with a spilled glass of wine, a stolen moment in a powder room, and a kiss that was never supposed to mean anything until it meant everything. Let's dive in. The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Orion Hotel cast a soft golden light on the sea of tuxedos and evening gowns below. In the center of the grand ballroom, where New York's most prestigious charity gala was underway, Clara Bennett weaved through the crowd with a tray of wine glasses balanced in perfect harmony, her back straight, her steps as fluid as a flawless pas de bourrée. A ballet dancer struggling to pay for studio rent and daily living, Clara took this catering job as a lifeline to keep her dream alive. She didn't belong here, in this world of polished smiles and hollow laughter. But she had mastered the art of invisibility. Like on stage, seen only when necessary, then gone. A sudden collision jolted her back to reality. A drunk guest stumbled into her path, sending the tray flying. Glass shattered with a crash, and red wine splashed across the front of her white uniform shirt. She staggered back, horrified, as whispers rippled through the crowd like waves. Clara bolted toward the guest powder room. Inside, she furiously dabbed at the spreading stains with paper towels, swallowing back tears. The door creaked open. Clara looked up, expecting another woman, but it was a man. He froze in surprise, then took a step back. "Sorry," he said. "I was looking for somewhere quiet to make a call." "The women's restroom isn't ideal for that," Clara replied, keeping her composure. He stepped in, this time without hesitation, and let the door close behind him. From his suit pocket, he pulled out a crisp silk handkerchief. "This works better than paper," he offered, holding it out. Clara hesitated before accepting. Their eyes met. "You're not staff," she noted. "And you're not like any server I've seen." "That's because I'm not like them." Clara lifted her chin, refusing to break the stare. He laughed, a low, genuine sound of surprise. "I'm Adrian." "Clara." And in that moment, between soft lighting and the scent of expensive perfume, something began. Clara wasn't sure what made her stay, his eyes, his calm voice, or the rare feeling of truly being seen, but she didn't leave. They talked in that powder room as if the world outside had vanished. Minutes blurred into hours. Adrian spoke of dull galas, of being surrounded by people who always wanted something. Clara shared stories of rehearsal studios, ripped point shoes, and the scent of sweat mixed with hope. They left the gala together, walking slowly beneath the New York night sky. The traffic, the lights, the whole world seemed to fade behind them. "Just one night of freedom," Adrian said, his voice low like wind brushing through empty streets. Clara glanced at him, half curious, half skeptical. "Completely crazy." "Utterly insane," he agreed, a quiet smile on his lips. "But worth it." She paused for a breath, then gave a soft laugh. "Totally crazy." And she nodded. An hour later, they were seated in the plush cabin of a private jet. Champagne sparkled in crystal glasses, laughter filled the air, and the city below was now a fading ribbon of lights. They talked non-stop. She shared memories of her childhood in dance studios, the calluses, the loneliness. He spoke of boardrooms filled with cold stares, of people who saw his wealth, not his soul. And then, almost naturally, the idea of marriage came up. When the jet landed in Las Vegas near 2 a.m., a limousine was waiting to take them to a small chapel glowing under neon lights. The sign out front read, "Eternal love in 30 minutes or less." Plastic rings were chosen from a dented silver tray. Their vows were scribbled on the back of a dinner receipt from the plane. An Elvis impersonator in a wig and sunglasses stood between them, crooning the soft melody of "Can't Help Falling in Love." "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Elvis said with a theatrical grin. Adrian turned and kissed her. It was soft, hesitant, uncertain, but something in it felt real. Morning light crept through the curtains of the hotel suite, spilling softly across the bed where Clara lay. She stirred slowly, her head pounding, mouth dry, and a strange weight on her left hand. She sat up suddenly. On her ring finger was a cheap plastic band, On the nightstand lay a napkin, scribbled with vows in blue ink, still faintly scented with champagne. It wasn't a dream. They had actually gotten married. Clara got up, quietly gathering the clothes scattered across the floor, trying to slip away unnoticed. But a familiar voice stopped her cold. "Running away already, Mrs. Wolfe?" She turned. Adrian leaned against the doorway, hair tousled, eyes tired but sharp. He didn't look like a man who had made a mistake. He looked like someone who had never been more certain. "This is insane," Clara said. "We got married drunk." "And if you want out, I won't stop you," Adrian said calmly. "But what if you didn't?" She said nothing. "Give me 6 months," he said, stepping closer. "We live like it's real. No strings. If you still think it's a mistake after that, you walk away. No drama, no hard feelings." "You treat marriage like a test drive?" "No," he said softly, "but I think what happened last night deserves a chance." Clara looked at him for a long beat, then she nodded. "On one condition," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "No prenups, no money, no pretending, just two real people, seeing what might happen." Adrian smiled. "Then let's begin, Clara Wolfe." 3 days later, Clara stepped into Adrian Wolfe's penthouse, and her first thought was overwhelmed. The ceiling soared sky high. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Manhattan skyline. Every inch of the place, from the ebony dining table to the cashmere rug beneath the Italian leather couch, radiated a level of wealth she had never touched. Clara clutched her canvas bag, filled with a few worn leotards and an old pair of point shoes. She didn't say anything, but her eyes spoke clearly. She didn't belong. "Welcome home," Adrian said, gently taking the bag from her. "I've cleared space in the master suite. But if you'd be more comfortable in the guest room across the hall?" She took a deep breath. "No. If we're doing this, we're doing it properly. No half measures." She quickly learned that living with someone like Adrian was a whole different world. He had a private driver, a personal assistant, and a housekeeper named Maria who came 3 times a week and insisted on calling Clara Madam, which made her blush. She stuck to her morning dance rehearsals, returning to her old studio, even as paparazzi began to lurk around the building after word of the surprise wedding got out. Blurry photos, tabloid headlines screaming, "Unknown ballerina marries billionaire." One afternoon, walking through the hall, Clara opened the wrong door and froze. Inside the room were dozens of framed photos of herself, canvas prints, stage shots, images she didn't even remember posing for. "You've been collecting pictures of me?" she asked, half accusing, half stunned. Adrian stood behind her, his voice quiet and honest. "I bought the first one at a charity auction. The rest I commissioned. But I never approached you. I stayed back, just watched." Clara turned to face him, her expression softening. "So, that night at the gala wasn't a coincidence." "No," he admitted, "but meeting you exactly then, that was something I never planned, and it changed everything." Clara was beginning to settle into her new rhythm, part wife of Adrian Wolfe, part ballet dancer who still spent her days at the same old studio, but peace never lasted long. One afternoon, Clara came home to find a woman seated in the living room, perfect blonde hair, a flawless cream-colored suit, and eyes that scanned Clara like a resume. Adrian stood up. "Clara, this is Veronica Lang." "Veronica?" The woman smiled, a smile that held no warmth. "Lovely to meet. Adrian's wife?" Clara nodded, feeling the chill between them despite the heated room. After Veronica left, Clara didn't hesitate. "Who is she?" "An ex," Adrian replied. "We were engaged years ago. It didn't work. She came today to propose a business collaboration." But Clara wasn't naive. Veronica's gaze hadn't been about business. Days later, Clara received an unexpected email from Ballet du Soleil, one of Europe's premier contemporary dance companies. They were inviting her to Paris to audition for the lead in their upcoming production. She froze. It was the kind of opportunity she'd dreamed about her entire life. But it felt sudden, too perfect. And when she did some digging, she found out Veronica was a major benefactor of the company. "I think she orchestrated this," Clara told Adrian. "She's trying to get rid of me." "Maybe," he admitted, "but you were invited because you deserve it. Don't let her motives steal what you've worked for." Clara studied him, then nodded. "I'll go, but I'll do it on my own terms." And just a few days later, she left New York, alone with a suitcase, her point shoes, and a heart that had started falling for the man she'd accidentally married. Paris welcomed Clara with soft skies and streets lined with quiet beauty. She rehearsed daily at the historic theater near Opera Square, where Ballet du Soleil was headquartered. The auditions were fast-paced, intense, and Clara pushed herself to the limit. Every night, she called Adrian. They talked for hours about her routines, his plans to open a Thor Industries office in Europe, and silly details that made the distance feel shorter. Then it all unraveled with one message. "You don't know what your husband's doing. Check the New York Post." Clara tapped her phone. On the front page was a blurry photo, Adrian exiting a Parisian hotel, his hand lightly on the back of a blonde woman. Her heart dropped. It was Elise, the architect Adrian had mentioned when discussing Clara's future studio, but the image looked more intimate than it should. Her chest burned, not just from betrayal, but from the ache of disappointment. The trust she had carefully rebuilt, piece by piece, now cracked at the edges. Without another word, she packed her things and booked the earliest flight back to New York. She didn't return to the penthouse. She went to her old Brooklyn apartment, the last place that still felt real. She didn't tell anyone, but Adrian still found her. When the buzzer rang and she opened the door, she froze. "You left without a word," he said, exhaling. "But I knew. If you were hurt, you'd go where you felt safe. And that place isn't with me." His shirt was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and his eyes full of regret. "I saw the photo," Clara said quietly. "I know, and I know what it looks like. But it was a walkthrough for your studio. Elise is just the architect. I have the emails, calendar invites, contracts, everything." Clara met his gaze. There was no denial, no performance, just raw, open hurt. "I'm not sure I can trust you anymore," she whispered. "I understand," Adrian said, "but I'll wait, if there's even a part of you that still wants to." She said nothing, but she didn't close the door. 1 week later, Wolfe Industries' annual gala took place at the Museum of Natural History. At first, Clara hadn't planned to attend. After everything that happened, the idea of facing cameras beside Adrian felt unbearable. She had promised herself she wouldn't go, that she'd stay hidden in the safety of old walls. But when the morning light touched the small velvet box in her mailbox, something inside her stirred, something that still believed in them. Inside were sapphire earrings, the same pair she had once admired through a jewelry store window but never dared to buy. Along with them was a handwritten note. "If you still believe in us, walk into that room with me, like we're truly husband and wife. A." Clara sat in silence for a long time, then she stood, slipping into the deep blue gown Adrian once said made her look like the sky right before dawn. When she entered the grand hall, every head turned. Adrian extended his hand. She placed hers in his without hesitation, together, unashamed. Mid the shimmer of music and whispers of speculation, a familiar voice cut through. "Clara." It was Veronica Lang. "You're very brave to show your face tonight." Clara smiled. "Bravery is knowing who you love and choosing not to walk away." Veronica raised a brow, but before she could respond, the ballroom lights dimmed. Adrian stepped onto the stage. "Before we continue tonight's program," he began, his gaze finding Clara in the crowd, "I need to say something." He spoke of a mistake, not of betrayal, but of silence that hurt the person he loved most. His voice rang clear through the curious crowd. "Nothing I've ever built matters more than that woman," he said, pointing to Clara. "And if anyone believes they can come between us, know this. I don't just love her, I choose her, every single day." The room held its breath for a moment, Then the applause came, thunderous and unrelenting. Clara didn't cry, but when Adrian turned back to her, the smile she gave him was the only answer he would ever need. 1 month after the gala, Clara stood in the lobby of the Ballet du Soleil Theatre in Paris, the stage lights glowing behind her, and in her hands, a thick envelope stamped in red. Official offer, lead role. She had been chosen. Despite the scandal, the doubts, the whispers, they saw her talent, not as Adrian Wolfe's wife, but as Clara, the dancer, herself. After the meeting, she stepped out onto her hotel balcony, and there he was. Adrian stood waiting, having flown in the night before without telling her, just to be there for this moment. "I didn't want to miss the second you chose yourself," he said, eyes lit with pride. Clara laughed, pulling him into a hug. They sat together in a quiet cafe near the theater. She told him about the loneliness after the scandal, the fear of never trusting again, and how deciding to stay in Paris wasn't about fame, it was about finding strength in herself. "And because you didn't give up on me," she whispered. Adrian squeezed her hand. "I'm still learning how to love you the way you deserve." Weeks later, they returned to Vegas, not to annul their marriage, but to renew it. No plastic rings, no Elvis, just them, the desert sunset, and a few loved ones. Clara wore a simple white dress, a single orchid tucked behind her ear. Adrian waited at the altar, his smile unable to hide the emotion in his eyes. "I chose her once without knowing a thing," Adrian said during the ceremony. "Today I choose her again, with all my heart and with my eyes wide open." Clara looked at him, tears shining. "I stepped into this marriage by accident," she said. "But the most beautiful part is, I fell in love with the husband fate accidentally gave me." They kissed, long and full, a true beginning. No more tests, no more conditions, just two people choosing each other, every day, and forever. 2 years after that sunset ceremony in the Las Vegas desert, where they held hands and spoke vows, no longer strangers from a reckless accident, Clara and Adrian were living a life that once felt impossible. A simple life, but quietly extraordinary. Adrian was still a CEO, yet his calendar no longer revolved around market charts, but around his family. Board meetings in the morning, then home in time to pick the kids up from daycare. Clara still danced, though now she chose fewer performances, giving more time to teach at the studio named after Adrian's mother, the one he'd quietly built, then handed to her to run completely. Then, one soft April day, their world grew by 2 more heartbeats, a set of twins. Avid with bright, mischievous brown eyes, always bouncing to whatever music drifted through the room, and Liam with ocean-deep blue eyes that made Clara catch her breath, because in them she saw Adrian's entire soul reflected back. The house that was once too quiet was now filled with giggles, wails, and the soft pitter-patter of tiny feet roaming the halls at 3 a.m. But not once did Clara resent the noise or the chaos. Because every time she woke in the middle of the night, Adrian was there, one arm wrapped protectively around her waist, the other still loosely clutching an empty baby bottle, having fallen asleep mid-lullaby. Tonight was no different. Clara turned gently, watching the face of the man once called the cold billionaire, now soft in sleep. She watched him sleep, one hand curled around their daughter's favorite stuffed bunny. Her heart ached, not from pain, but fullness. They'd been through everything, and somehow, they'd chosen each other again and again. "I accidentally married a billionaire, but loving the man behind the fortune, that was the best decision of my life,"